suggestions. With the concept of, I would rather start with the concept of post-Soviet. The thing is, this concept as theoretical construction is very important for my research in general, since I do trace continuity, or I try to do so, right? That it all started the whole story started in late 1980s. And this is why, to some extent, the way heritage sites are managed, or the museums are run, again, that they are post-Soviet because of, in terms of structure, we do see such continuity in terms of how the system functions and so on and so forth, and also how funds are distributed. But yeah, I might reconsider just enumerating the 3 countries or the cities, because you're completely right. I don't even wish to take a look on either Russia or Poland within this dissertation, because it's just too much work, and maybe I will do it in the broader comparative perspective in the postdoctoral level, but it's just, yeah, I need to finish. And then, yes, there are certain private commercial initiatives for sure, also within these, if not the cities, but the countries. But those would be rather destinations for cultural tourism, which are commercial, of course. And then where it brings us is the general difference and the core difference in approach when launching these kind of sites of memory or sites of heritage. So that would be, I will think about giving bringing them to background, but it rather would need a separate comparison in order to use these sites in other sites for analysis. Then I did interviews religious community leaders. You cannot imagine how difficult it is. Well, guess why? They don't answer your questions. Because it's not there. First of all, because majority of the people who will, in all 4 sites, in 4 cities, those would be leaders of the religious community of congregation of Chabad, which means that they are pretty conservative. They're not really interested. They are dealing with the soul, as they say, right? And again, they're not local. They're usually sent from US or Israel. And it's not that it's so easy to get their opinion on these matters. So it's kind of like this. Well, this is why I will be bringing, I did interview them, but I wouldn't say that was so visible, apart from the fact that they were on purpose avoiding answering my questions. And then, power struggles, right. Thank you for this suggestion. Although I think if I actually write about the power struggles within these museums or art institutions, they will never speak to me again.
It's a no.
That's a prize.
Yeah. That's the prize, because the thing is, of course it is highly, the tensions are there, right? And there are a lot of conflicts on what to exhibit, how to exhibit, also if there are funds to acquire things to exhibit and so on and so forth, and not only, of course, I'm not going to go into details now. And the interview showed that the respondents would try to do their best in order to show me that everything is fine and they all work together and they live happily ever after. Of course, it's not the way it happens. But all these, the functioning of the museums is built on the power struggles precisely because they have up to 20 programs, and then within the organization, and then the museum would be just one of them, right? So it's distribution of resources and so on and so forth. But again, it's very difficult for me to discuss something which is not voiced, right? And it's very difficult actually to get what is going on there. If they're not speaking, they're not speaking on purpose. Huh? Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for another wonderful presentation. Now, next, before the lunch break, is from Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Yemina Cohen-Aharoni. And your reviewer, trainer, will be Dr. Rūta Bagdanavičiūtė. And the title is Commemorating the Temple in Heritage Sites around the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I will put it on the screen in a minute. So we have 25 minutes?
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you very much for inviting me. In the Jewish tradition, Vilnius is referred to as Yerushalayim Delita, which means the local supplement for Jerusalem. So this is a very good place to talk about Jerusalem and to talk about the temple. My research deals with the way the temple is commemorated in heritage site around Jerusalem. I will just put the stopper on. There we go. So what am I going to talk about? This is the old city of Jerusalem. This is my imaginary pointer. Now I'm going to talk about the area of the Golden Dome, over there, the Western Wall, which is the wall over here, very close to my side. You recognize it in there? All right. When we think of memory, we usually think of a private or a social process which contains some kind of dealing with the past, with something that is gone. The Temple of Jerusalem, which is not in the photo, is a unique case study because it refers also to the future. Because for many believers worldwide, Jews and Christians, it is understood to be returning at the end of days. Let me give you some brief historical introduction. According to the Jewish tradition, the first temple was built by King Solomon over here where you see the Golden Dome right now. Later on, the temple was destroyed, rebuilt. We have the second temple. This is the time of Jesus, the Roman period, and that temple was also destroyed. Now, according to the Jewish tradition and also some Christian traditions, the third temple will be built at the end of days at the exact original location over there. There is only one location for the temple, and as you can see from the photo, this location has been used since the 7th century as a Muslim shrine. This is the third most holy place for Islam in the world after Mecca and Medina. Recently, it is also became a main symbol of Palestinian nationhood. So it's the original and / future location of the temple and also a Muslim and Palestinian shrine. This research compares 3 heritage sites that are located around the Temple Mount. You can see them here, Davidson Center, Western Wall Heritage Tunnel in blue, and the small dot, the Temple Institute. These heritage sites deal with the issue of the temple, but are not located in the original site of the temple where you see the Golden Dome, but rather adjacent to it from the outside. By comparing the way the temple is commemorated in these sites, I hope to discuss 2 theoretical issues. The first one will be the influence of the future on the commemoration of the past. Now, as scholars of collective memory, we know that one of the main issues of the question of memory is what affect memory. Many people argue that the present affect the way we remember. Others stress that it is the past that influences the way we remember the past. I offer a different point of view by saying that maybe the image of the things to come or the image of the future can affect the way we remember the past. And by image of things to come, I mean an expectation about the state of things to come, something that might happen. And here, the something that might happen is this. This is the temple, built on the Temple Mount. That's a better picture, I think. My argument is that this image is difficult future. Now, we heard the phrase difficult past here, I think more than once. Difficult past by Wagner, Pacifici, and Schwartz refers to an event that happened in the past which are moral trauma, like the Holocaust in Germany, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in Israel, for instance. My argument here basically says that things to come, things that will happen or might happen, can also be events that are morally problematic and threat the social consensus within the society. Why is this a difficult future? Because the building of the temple entails the destruction of the Muslim and Palestinian shrine, the renewal of animal sacrifices, and possible theocracy. When I wanted to put, you know how sometimes sociologists like to put a poster of poster or artifacts from their research in their bureau office. So I wanted to put this poster in my office, but my colleague said, wow, students might complain because this image is offensive in Israel. This is the image of the difficult future and that you don't want to deal with. And my argument is that the image of this difficult future metaphorically affect the decision makers in the heritage site and thus influence our memory. My second argument relates to the issue of space and time. When we talk about space, until now there was two different ways to talk about space of memory. Vinitsky-Sarusi spoke about memory that takes place where it really happened, exactly where the blood was spilled, for instance. In the contrary, Deckel described memory that takes place in an unauthentic, remote location not connected to the subject of memory. Here, my research deals with heritage sites that form a new category of space of memory, which is space in proximity. So close, but not the original location. As close as you can get to where the temple used to be, and yet slightly remote from the original location of the temple. I refer to it as place in proximity, categorized by the proximity to the original location of the temple, but yet this proximity is an essential element in the message and the character of the heritage site, and it enables the space to be interpreted in different ways, as I will show in a minute. My argument is that the way the temple is, the way space is represented is connected to temporal perspective or the element of time. Mainly the question is, to what part of time is the temple associated? Was it connected to the past, to the present, or to the future? And I will show a connection between the usage of time and the interpretation of space. From a methodological point of view, I wanted to impress you with numbers and thick glasses. Here, what you can see basically is the numbers of different interviews and observations I did between July 2013 and up until now. I just visited the whole city, the sites during the Pesach holiday, which was a very important time of the year in these sites. That collection was done basically by interviewing the local guides in these sites, participating in their guided tours, talking with the visitors, interviewing the archaeologists that constructed or put together the heritage site, and also the decision makers that deal with it today. I obtained permission to conduct this research from the decision maker in the heritage sites. It was very challenging because of the political atmosphere around the Temple Mount, and perhaps later on I could discuss and explain how I managed to achieve that. Moving on to the findings, I will now present the 3 heritage sites that I'm going to talk about, and for each of them I'm going to basically I'm going to explain 2 things. First, what is the attitude regarding the image of the future, and how does that affect memory? And second, what temporal perspective was chosen, to which part of time is the temple associated, and how is it connected to the place in proximity. So starting with the Davidson Center, over here you can see the huge, relatively big part colored in green. This is a heritage site owned by the city and the state together. It occupies the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount. Okay, can you see it? So basically the western wall. The western wall starts over here at this corner and then goes all the way up. The western wall, let's just see where have I landed. Have you heard about the western wall? So that's a strong yes. All right, the western wall has been for the last 400 years the main place of prayer for Jews around the world, and also considered the most holy place of prayer and longing for Jews for the last 400 years. It is also an archaeological treasure. It is also a wall from the time of King Herod. This is King Herod, from this period. So here in this archaeological site, Davidson Center was built by the Israeli Antiquity Authority, which is a scientific institution dealing with archaeology, governmental scientific institution. And here the approach towards the future of the temple is complete denial. Let me give you a quote to get the feeling of what completely denial is. That's a quote from one of the decision makers and also a well-known archaeologist. The thing that angers me the most is the people that want to build a temple. To slaughter cows on the Temple Mount? Oh my God. In my opinion, it's going to be horrible. There should be no future for the temple. There is no future for the temple. The temple is not in the future. So that's complete rejection. No future for the temple. And indeed, in this heritage site, which you can see over here, there is no reference to the possibility or the tradition or the notion that the temple might / is perceived to be coming or might be rebuilt in the future. The guides are instructed to talk about the temple using only the past tense and referring to it only as a historical, archaeological notion. And that's very interesting because for a lot of the visitors, they actually want to talk about the future of the temple. A lot of the Christian and Jewish visitors are enthusiastic about the returning temple. And the guides are instructed to completely reject this notion. Sometimes they are very angry. I have one quote here. Excuse me, this is a museum. Like, you cannot have this kind of discourse here. What do they mean by this is a museum? They mean this future is a threat, is a moral threat. Let's not talk about it. So if we have a rejection of the future, the temporal perspective that was chosen is the past. Let's make the temple a historical fact, something that happened and that's it. To support this point of view, we have the interpretation of space. Over here you can see the Western Wall. Now you can actually see it, unlike earlier on, which is, as I said, the main praying place for Jews for centuries and also an archaeological evidence. Here they chose to interpret the place in proximity as historical and archaeological only. In this picture you can see there are ropes protecting, this is the guide over there, and the ropes protecting the Western Wall so you can't touch it and you can't get any closer to it because they don't want you to interpret or to experience space as national or religious, but rather only to emphasize its historical and archaeological value. Sometimes there is some religious activity allowed there, but the guides are instructed to ignore it. And basically, if they have loudspeakers, for instance, then they should keep on using them. And the people that pray there the prayer will only be secondary to the archaeological and historical activity. So here you have it. The attitude towards the future is rejection. The temple is in the past only, and the space in proximity is archaeological. So from the image of the temple, we move to archaeological findings. The second heritage site I'm going to discuss is the Western Wall Tunnel. Can you see it in blue, marked in blue? That's lovely. So the Western Wall Heritage Tunnel is the most popular heritage site, fee-charging heritage site in the old city of Jerusalem. Enjoys great public consensus in Israel. I will explain in a minute what do I mean by that. What is the Western Wall Heritage Tunnel? It's basically a subterranean passage underneath the houses of the Muslim quarter, right next to the Western Wall. So this blue line over here goes all the way next to the Western Wall. The same Western Wall we spoke about a minute ago. Now, as I said, this is a very popular heritage site. For instance, the current and indeed perpetual Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, once referred to it as the foundation stone of our existence. And there are many other examples for that. So this is a governmental, semi-governmental institution which is operated by Orthodox Jews. So it is managed or directed by the rabbi of the Western Wall, who receives his lifelong appointment from the government. So you have an interesting combination here of, you can call it church and state, maybe I prefer a synagogue and state relationship here. On the right-hand side, the people that deal and work and operate this site are religious Orthodox Jews. So they pray 3 times a day for the return of the temple. But on the other hand, their mission is to approach as big variety of people as possible, most notably Israeli school children. And so they have a paradox here. This was expressed by one of the decision makers, and that's a quote. The fear is that if we start to talk about the third temple, people will feel uncomfortable and we will lose their connection with the Western Wall. So, straightforward, there is fear. I once fear of the image of the future. I once stood there with 2 of the local guides, and one of them, who was fired later on for different reasons, not exactly different. He said that there is a lot of fear in the tunnels because he is not allowed to discuss the future of the temple. And he thinks that he should be allowed to say, yes, we are going to build a third temple. And then another guy, who is a Jewish American man, stood next to him, doing this kind of face. And he said, you know, do you always say to a fat lady, you are fat? No, you don't do that. It's the same. You don't have to say the truth just because it's the truth. So basically, yes, they think the temple is going to be built, but they're not going to tell you that because they fear the difficult image of the future, the image of the difficult future. So the future is scary. We don't want to deal with that. And the past is also not exactly so relevant. When I introduced myself to one of the decision makers there, I said, hello, I'm blah, 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 and I'm from the University, and I'm a student on collective memory. And he said, oh, wow, that's very interesting. What are you doing here? We don't deal with memory, and this is not a museum. So there is no connection to the past here. So no future, no past. What do we have left? Only the present. Now take a good look at this photo here. There is no temple on the Temple Mount. So how can you represent the temple? How can you talk about the temple in the present? That's very challenging. Let's see a wee bit of photos here. That's the Western Wall, and that's Yemina, the Prime Minister. How can you talk about the temple in the present? Basically, my argument here, and that's controversial, and maybe later I'll explain why and how. My argument is that they basically copied the traditional usage of the temple and pasted into the Western Wall. During the tour, the guides will teach you what the temple was. For example, a house of prayer for all nations. That's very common if you're not Israeli, as a message. And then they will explain throughout the tour how today the house of prayer for all nations is the Western Wall. For instance, this is exactly what the rabbi of the Western Wall told this man when he visited the tunnels a few years ago. That's President Obama here in the photo. I didn't have the opportunity to participate in this visit because that's of course a state visit, but I interviewed the people that translate the rabbi of the Western Wall. So I got a second-hand knowledge of this visit. So the temple is basically existing in the present at the Western Wall itself. And that will affect the interpretation of space. The place in proximity, close to the Temple Mount, becomes the most important part, the most important place in the world. As the Prime Minister said, the foundation stone of our existence. Here you can see the tourists instructed by the guides to touch the wall and to feel emotionally connected to it. The guides explain again and again how the Western Wall is the beating heart of our existence, both Israeli and from an Israeli or Jewish point of view. The guides are instructed in their training that if they touch the wall like this during the tour, then the visitors will imitate them. And you can see it's basically happening right over here. This lady is a very famous guide over there. Every time she reaches the Western Wall in her tour, this is what she's doing. She didn't allow me to take a video of that. She leaves the tour, she leaves the group, goes to the Western Wall, which is over here in the photo, puts her hand on the wall and kissed the wall and started to pray a little bit on it, basically to emphasize that this is important, that this place is not in proximity to the original location of the temple, but this is the real thing. So the place in proximity becomes the most important Jewish and Israeli leading symbol, and you can see it here from the image of the temple. We are going back to the Western Wall itself. The last, and I think most interesting and most unfamiliar, perhaps, heritage site I'm going to discuss is the Temple Institute. It's a relatively small heritage site on the way to the Temple Mount, this is a non-profit organization whose aim is to promote the knowledge of the temple in order to rebuild in the future. And their motto is, dare to dream, dare to build. So this is not hidden, it's straightforward. And the Temple Institute basically contains an exhibition of the temple vessels, which you see in front of you, which are represented as the real vessels that will be used in the third temple that will be built in 5 years, according to their point of view. So the approach towards the future here is anticipation, and active anticipation. Of course, the temple is not in the past, it is not in the present, but rather it is in the upcoming future. in order to emphasize that, they discuss these vessels that you see here using the future tense. This will be used, the high priest will wear so-and-so. And another way to do it is to connect the temple with modern high-tech vessels, like the following quote from one of the guides. "We are not going to ride along horses and donkeys. I always tell the visitors that the temple is going to have plasma screens, and we are going to have iTemple app. So you'll be able to order your lamb sacrifice online," which basically you can already do. They sacrificed the lamb last Passover, that was a week ago, and you were able to order online your lamb. Here you can see, this is the temple. Over there you can see the light train of Jerusalem, a designated parking place for people with special needs. So positioning the temple in the near future helps the temple be perceived as connected to the future, of course. You can imagine it. It's not something far from you. Earlier I stated that this image is difficult future. And we saw that in the Davidson Center and also in the Western Wall Heritage Tunnel, this is difficult future, which is a threat, which you have to resist. In the Davidson, here in the Temple Institute, they have a contra memory or a different approach. They don't understand this image as difficult future. Let me give you one quote from one of the decision makers. "If the visitors ask about the Dome of the Rock is the Golden Dome, the Muslim and Palestinian shrine, which is over there. I say to them, I don't care how it will be moved. An earthquake, a hurricane. 3 months ago, we had rockets fired at Jerusalem, and I believe that one of them will just hit the mountain and blow up the dome." So basically, this is complete. There is no problem here. They don't understand it as morally challenging. Another quote from a different angle, which also echoes a biblical point of view on the subject, is the following quote: "The Arabs will understand there is no need for their mosque, and they will be the first one to be happy with the building of the temple. So there won't be any problem because there won't be any problem." So that's like in the sentence already. So this choice of a temporal perspective is to position the temple in the future, not to understand the future as problematic or morally challenging. And this affects, in my opinion, the interpretation of space. We saw earlier on that the place in proximity is important. Either it is historically important, or it is the beating heart of the Israeli national identity. Here, they try to diminish the importance of the place in proximity because their goal is different. They don't want you to fix about the Western Wall or the Southern Wall or the archaeological findings. They want to reach the original location of the temple, which is the Temple Mount itself. So they basically explain to the visitors that this is just a bridgehead. It's important to be close because from here, as they say again and again, it will be easy to carry the vessels onto the Temple Mount once the temple will be built. And then they usually say they will tear down the walls of the institution to take the vessels out because the institution, this museum won't be important anymore. They always say, I hope we will be we won't have a job because once the temple will be built, the place in proximity will lose its importance. And the place in proximity is just a bridgehead towards the most important place, which is the Temple Mount. I once was there during the lights were off, the electricity went down, so we had a conversation, a new employee, me and 2 of the guides, and the new employee told the guides, you know, since I came here, I don't go to pray in the Western Wall so often anymore. I don't pray there so often. And the guides, the ladies, were very enthusiastic about what he said, and they said, very good, now you will only go there once a week, but later you will only go once a month, and maybe later you won't go there at all, like encouraging him as if he's kicking the habit of smoking, or something like that. Why? Because the Western Wall, from their point of view, is a dangerous, addictive supplement of the real thing, which is the location of the temple and the temple itself. During this holiday, Passover holiday, there was a Malaysian tourist, evangelical Malaysian tourist in the Temple Institute, and she was so enthusiastic about the fact that these are the vessels of the temple, like this is the real thing, and she took down off her shoes, because she said this is holy ground. So the guide took her by the hand, showed her the location of the golden dome,